What's the situation on the ground right now in Israel? Any insight on when Iran could be reacting?
Well, it's a moving target. I think that's the best way to understand it. There have been several moments, including last night, when it looked like military action, some sort of coordinated military action by Iran and Hezbollah was going to come. And we saw last night Israel go into its highest state of alert and readiness. But a week ago, I was hearing from very senior military commanders that they thought it was going to happen at that time. And I don't think that they were wrong necessarily then, or they were misinformed. Otherwise, the United States wouldn't have sent 2 aircraft carriers to the region, one being sped up on the way, and F-22s, and sent the commander of CENTCOM. All of this is tremendously expensive. They moved because they were acting on intelligence and have believed that it was coming then, and it seems that Iran is still trying to calibrate when and where and how to react. The new development right now, and this has just changed in the last few hours, and this is only coming from Reuters, but I'm corroborating it through other means. Reuters is reporting, citing 3 sources, that Iran is now holding off on its retaliation. Could be proven wrong, could come at any moment. The troops are still here. Israel is still at a state of high alert. But the reporting is that Iran is holding off for now because it wants to take part directly in ceasefire negotiations, and that it would strike if those ceasefire negotiations to release the hostages and stop the military campaign on Gaza fail, or if it is perceived, or they perceive, that Israel, specifically Benjamin Netanyahu, is dragging his feet, is deliberately trying to avoid a commitment, then they would strike in that case. And I've spoken to negotiators, one negotiator in particular at a very senior level, and he's aware of this, did not deny it, said that he has not received any formal application for Iran to take part in the talks, but that he would not oppose it, and that we had a discussion with the idea that should Iran have been there perhaps from the beginning, since it was always a major player. So there is still this hanging sword that could drop, but there is also a diplomatic track, potentially with Iran getting involved, and diplomatic visits from the Biden administration heading to this region over the next several days. So there is a lot of moving parts that need to fall into place. So we're either going to escalation on one hand, or we're going to de-escalation and a potential diplomatic route on the other. And really, it boils down to what do Hamas want, what does Yahya Sinwar want, and what is Prime Minister Netanyahu willing to accept.
And Mubarak, I know you've got some new reporting on efforts to reach that ceasefire deal.
Exactly, Jose. Talking about that diplomatic route that Richard was just referencing, we know that CIA Director Bill Burns is expected to be in Doha for what would be critical talks on a potential ceasefire deal that would free some of the hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. Those are scheduled for Thursday, but we know, given the potential for escalation in the region, it's possible that some of that could change, though the U.S., the Biden administration, saying they fully want to pursue these negotiations, and that is why they're sending their top diplomat and negotiator, who has been part of all of these different rounds of talks, so many different iterations, moments where it seemed like things were close, but where the final gaps are clearly the most critical to close. And we've been in that position time and time again over the last few months. So that is the plan over the next couple of days. And in addition to the CIA director, we know that the White House coordinator for the Middle East, Brett McGurk, is going to be in the region as well. He was expected to first be in Cairo for some talks between Israeli and Egyptian officials there. And then he would also be in Doha later in the week, we expect, to come to the table and continue to hash out some of these things. But even the U.S. National Security Council yesterday conceded that if there is some major escalation, if we do see that, depending on what happens here, maybe the Thursday talks would have to be moved or affected. But it is the priority of the United States that they go on as scheduled, and they're really trying to frame this as a last and best and final offer, even though we've heard that kind of language before, even when the talks have sadly collapsed or gone nowhere. But the U.S., the president specifically, has been on the phone with allies, with countries like Germany, France, Italy, the U.K., to try to talk to those leaders about what's happening there, the current tensions, in addition to trying to shore up more support for this potential deal to finally crystallize, though there are a lot of obstacles still before that can be done. Jose.
And General, meanwhile, what are the options that Iran has? And the last time they attacked Israel, they did so with hundreds of missiles and drones, et cetera. What is it that they have in their arsenal now that they could utilize?
Well, I think you'll see a different picture now. We must remember that not only Haniyeh was killed in Tehran, but you also had in Hezbollah, when you had Shakur also killed, the leader and the mastermind behind the soccer field attack. There was a retaliatory strike on him, and then he was killed as well. If you take a look at Hamas, you had Mohammed Deif killed. He was the Al-Qassam leader, longtime leader of military forces in Hamas. So I think what has changed in this, all would be looking to retaliate against Israel. And I think the Iranians will use their proxies in this fight. If you go back to the April fight, it was primarily an Iranian 300 missiles and drone attack. I think Hezbollah will get involved. I think Hamas will try and fire missiles from the Gaza Strip. And we cannot forget about the Houthis down in the south, whether they will act, or whether or not the proxies that are located in Syria and Iran, where they will act as well. And they may act against U.S. forces that are stationed in the region. And that's why it's so critical to set our defensive posture, not only to defend and assist the Israel in defending Israel, but also to protect U.S. forces in the region.
You know, Ambassador Pincus, Iran has been involved through their different proxies, right, in the area for so many years now. And now it seems that, and just listening to what Richard was telling us, Iran wants to insert itself into the diplomatic side of the negotiations, et cetera, that would force the rest of the world to deal with Iran as a major player. How do you see this part of the kind of the puzzle of what Iran has been doing and what it wants to do?
Well, there are two levels here, Jose. One is indigenously Iranian, and one has to do with their foreign relations. Indigenously, they're thinking about the cost effectiveness of any retaliation against Israel, and General Tweedy was absolutely right in describing the scene. There are two levels of escalation: what you could do bilaterally, Iran against Israel, and how do you use your proxies? Let's not forget that the proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, it's not like a McDonald's franchisee, you know, where the restaurant, one may be in Cincinnati and one in Miami, but they both have the same colors, the same furniture, the same menus. These are not exactly franchisees. They operate independently. The second thing that I think constrains Iran, but also is helpful to it, is, believe it or not, China. The Chinese have levers of power and influence over Iran. And I don't know this for a fact, but I'm connecting dots here, that the U.S. and the Chinese have cooperated, perhaps tacitly, not so much directly, on de-escalation. Because the Iranians are heavily invested in Iran. Iran sees China as a superpower mentor that sort of equalizes or countervails the U.S. And all this leads to some kind of a recalibration in Iran. And again, like Richard said correctly, it could happen in an hour, and everything we just said here is null and void. Nonetheless, it looks like there's a serious thinking process going on.
Interesting. And Richard, meanwhile, as this is all going on, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is only getting worse.
It is being described as unlivable in Gaza. We speak daily to our team in Gaza, our teams in Gaza, different parts of the Gaza Strip. And every time I speak to them, I don't know how they can do it, how people can possibly live under the conditions where they are living. It has been now many months. People are moving. Pretty much everyone in Gaza has been displaced from their home at least once, most people multiple times. It is incredibly hot. Things are outrageously expensive. There are shortages of everything from food, no clean water to speak of. Soap is almost impossible to find. Medicine is almost impossible to find. There's no such thing as a humanitarian zone, really. The humanitarian zone has been struck several times, Israel says, because Hamas is taking advantage of it and putting its fighters inside of it. And just recently, Israel ordered another partial evacuation of the humanitarian zone. And just to give you an example of a story that we're working on right now, there were two newborn babies, and they were swaddled in their wraps, and they had just been brought home, and they'd been born 4 days ago. The father went out. He went to go get a birth certificate. While he was out, an Israeli strike hit the house, killed the two babies and his wife, and we have an image of him holding the death certificate in an absolute state of despair. There are also still hostages in Gaza in this situation, being held mostly underground in tunnels because it would be, at this stage, probably too difficult to move them around. Israel keeps searching and researching areas. They have been there, many of them, since October 7th, perhaps not seeing any sunlight, many of them wounded. So across the Gaza Strip, for the 2.2 million people, for the hostages, it is hard to see how it is survivable for much longer.